Delighted to say I'm joined by Cahair O'Kane of the Irish News for Club Talk Football. Cahair, how are you getting on?
Good, Shane, yourself?
I'm not too bad. You were at a match at the weekend. I believe you were at it was Clontibbert against Ballybay up in the Monaghan Football Championship. What was your experience of that? You know, obviously it's great to be back on the scene as well. But what was the experience like?
Strange.
Yeah.
Strange in that, people talk about 200 and 200 as being the figure, but you actually eliminate the players and the officials and the management and the media from that, and the two clubs had 110 tickets to share between them for, this was the league champions against the championship holders in Monaghan. This was a game that generated massive interest, and I know the clubs and Monaghan County Board were tortured with people looking to get to this game, and Ballybay, to be fair to them, stuck very, very tight to the 200 person limit and ran a great operation there and ran a great ship on Sunday afternoon, and everything was done to perfection in the way the guidelines would want them to do it. But it was surreal. It was my first time at Ballybay's ground. Used to host Monaghan games and big club championship games years and years ago, but they had stopped taking them. So I think the club had actually asked to stop taking them.
Right.
And this was my first time down there, and they have this great big stand, where there's concrete steps, maybe 8 deep, and big long concrete steps, and then a huge big grass bank on the far side, and a bit of gravel banking in front of it, and then in the stand there was maybe 20-25 people dotted along the back row of the stand and against the wall, and it was just, and then there was a few dotted outside the stand and more on the far side out in the bank, because it was a nice sunny day, but they were all well distanced, and it was a wee bit surreal. It felt, it felt like two different things. The game itself, the game was enjoyable. The game was a good game. It was very physical. Adrian Mullen from Scottstown refereed it, and I thought he choked on his whistle after 2 minutes because he never blew it.
That's what you want.
And look, for me, for a neutral, it was absolutely brilliant value, his style of refereeing. But there was one stage where Desi Moan was coming out with a ball, and I think it was Thomas Kerr caught him a real softener. As he, the ball was there, but he just caught him a real softener.
That's a euphemism now.
He shot up, and then somebody else came in from the other side and had him another slap on the other side, and he didn't get a free for either. And it was just like, it was seriously physical stuff for a lot of it, but good value. So a good game, and a game that a big crowd in a venue like that would have added so much to. Some of the best championship games you're at are in smaller venues, and where it's really, really tight and physical, and they are, the best games to be at as a neutral, I think. Maybe that's an Ulster man talking, like.
No, I think you're on the money there. But you did a piece with John McEntee, who was managing Clontibbert. Obviously people will know him from Armagh and from Crossmaglen. But afterwards he was talking about the amount of crowds that would be going to these games and even challenge matches. Sure, they're very much unregulated. I mean, obviously they have to be sanctioned, but in terms of having officials there to make sure there aren't big crowds at those games, anecdotally you'd see huge crowds showing up. And then I was looking at some games being streamed online, and for example in Semple Stadium you'd have a certain cohort of people fairly centrally in the stand close to the Count Corla section, and then you have huge swathes of seats, where normally this can fit 45 to 50,000, absolutely empty, and it just seemed a little crazy. But what there was a bit of a throwback. An awful lot of cars parked on the banks of a field just overlooking, and people being able to comfortably sit in their cars and watch the game. So I enjoyed seeing that. But there does seem to be a bit of a craziness in terms of you can have 400 now up in the north versus it's still 200 down in the south.
It's a bit trailer funny you're saying about the people sitting in cars. We had pictures last weekend. Irish News was talking about Mal McCann got some great shots in Carrigan. They were playing St John's, I think, in the first round of the Antrim League, and there were lines of people sitting on top of their vans outside the gate
Right.
They just lined all the vans along the outside wire, and they were all sitting on top of the vans watching the game because they weren't allowed in at that stage. There was nobody allowed in the north. And then there were pictures from other venues of boys up in cherry pickers, and I was sent one picture where there were 9 people on a digger, between 5 on the bucket, 3 standing on the cab, and 1 sitting on top of it. Like, so, people find inventive ways to get seeing football, but look, the limits. Like John McEntee spoke about, in 2 very different ways. He is an assistant director in the Southern Health and Social Care Trust in the north here, so he's involved in health service, and he spoke about being very wary and being very anxious about the entire thing. He'd been very anxious about comedy training and the possibility of some of the players picking it up. And now that society's reopened and fellas going to house parties and going out to pubs and going back into shops, and everything's getting back towards normalisation in terms of society, but the virus isn't gone, and that that sort of worried him. And I think his words were, he's happy to be back at football, but in the circumstances he'd rather he wasn't. And the way it is. And then by the same token, he said they've made the decision to open it up. So you look around Ballybay yesterday, and it would comfortably, with social distancing, with people 2 meters apart, would comfortably held 1,000 people yesterday, and would have alleviated some of, I say 55 tickets each. The 2 clubs got. Ballybay raffled theirs among members, and anybody that got a ticket for that game will not be in the raffle for the next game or the game after that, because they have everybody to get round. Clontarf took their tickets and gave them all to the players, for the players to give to whoever they wanted. But so you can see logic to both ways of doing it, but there's no sorting out the rows.
I feel very sorry for older people, like the people who had to cocoon and go through a really, really tough time, and fear for their lives far more so than younger people, because this obviously hurts older people an awful lot more in a general sense if you were to look at the stats. But I'd be there thinking, my father couldn't go and watch the club that he supported since he was a young lad. Now he was able to get a stream online, and that is great. But you have people out there who've followed the club for 50, 60, 70 years, and they can't go and see their club after going through months and months of hardship. I think that's very tough on the older people.
Yeah, and I think, I wouldn't be complaining about, and I think some people would say, glad to have football back, and to have anybody at it is, and we're still in the middle of this, and there's an argument that there shouldn't be people at it. There's an argument that the crowd should be limited the way they are, and there's an argument that should be more. I think what we've done in the north is, while there's a limit of 400 at the minute, I think that was sort of quickly put in. The executive made the decision quite late last week, Thursday or Friday. Ulster Council probably had a day at most to sort of turn something around, where championship games were starting Friday night and Saturday and Sunday. But they have said that they will review that again this week, with a potential to increase that figure. And the executive in the north has actually given the GA and other sport bodies the licence to risk assess their own grounds and set their own capacity for outdoors. So there's a fair chance that what we were talking about will happen in the north this week, where you have, say, Oma, or any county ground, any ground with a big stand and big terrace, and they'll do a risk assessment. How many people can we fit in this ground with social distancing, and you can set that figure at 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, whatever it happens to be. So there's a good chance that our figure will go up a fair bit this week, whereas in the north, I think it's August 10th. In the south, I think it's August 10th that the limit will be imposed of 200 at least till this point. It's just a lack of consistency in the whole thing. Like, there we were in the north a week earlier, where we weren't allowed anybody in at all, and then a week later, 7 days later, the south is looking up at us and saying, well, look, they're allowed 400, why are we not?
Yeah.
And it's, there's just no consistency. There's no All Ireland, but that's a government issue, not a GA issue, and the GA can only follow and do what they're being told they're allowed to do.
Yeah, it feels like a nanny state sometimes. I can understand with the pubs a little bit more so, and it's very hard on pubs, for example, that the ones that hadn't been open for a few weeks are getting punished because of the behaviour of some pubs that were allowed to open, and those ones, the Dame Lane situation, that they're allowed to continue to operate, whereas the Mammy and Daddy pub down the country still has to stay closed. But like, it's one thing in pubs because people have a few pints and all sort of caution goes out the window and they're going to just behave as they normally would, whereas at a GA ground, going to a game, if everyone is told, look, keep a certain distance apart, everyone knows what to do here. It's the same as walking down the street. We all know to give each other a bit of a wide berth. Outdoor venue, 19 times less likely to contract it, all that kind of stuff. Community transmission very low. It just seems so OTT to me at this stage that grounds aren't opened up far more, because like in general, most of the clubs around the country, how big of a following do they have? It's not like they have 30,000 fans here. You're talking about 1,000, maybe 2,000 at some of these games, whereas Semple Stadium fits 50,000, and you could name many, many more grounds that are not too far off that.
Yeah, and what you're going to see as well is, traditionally there's a wee bit more time, even for the clubs, there's a wee bit more time to do things. And I know in certain counties, particularly I know in Derry from personal experience, that the Derry County Board have always been very good at staggering games across a weekend. So you would have had games on Thursday night, Friday night, and then you would have a whole, you could go mad on a Saturday and Sunday because you had a game at 12, 2, 4, 6 and 8 sort of thing, and you they were set, the venues were set. It was all very well done, and you could have got to a lot of games. But what you're going to see at the minute is the window's so tight, there are only a limited number of days, and so counties, and there are more games to play because a lot have changed their system and introduced round robins. And in Monaghan is a bigger championship system, and in Antrim it's a home and away round robin to give clubs more games, so you've less time to stagger them. So the neutral crowd are going to go to their own club's game. They're not going to get to 5 or 6 games in the weekend. So the crowds that would actually be coming are going to reduce on each game, you would think. So there's definitely all of that argument in it. And I think, like, personally, I don't know what the right thing. Like, I'm not a doctor or scientist, same as everybody else. Like, but it just seems that John McEntee's point yesterday: are we playing for the sake of it? Are we playing club championships for the sake of it, or what is the point? Because without spectators, like, as I, sort of said to him, and I was chatting to Paul Finlay, Ballybay afterwards, like, and Paul's 37 now and still going rightly. But can you imagine a county final? Like, that was such a surreal game because there was 200 people, 110 people at it yesterday. And can you imagine a county final being played in those circumstances where you're allowed 200 or 500? The lack of atmosphere, the lack of sense of occasion, and also, I mean, talk about rows over getting tickets for a first round game. Like, how the hell do you decide who gets tickets for a county final if you're only allowed 500 people? And so it's nearly easier for clubs if nobody's allowed in. If you just lock the gates and say, look, we can't, because then you can't offend anybody. There's nobody allowed in, and letting 200 in is almost creating rows and creating tension and making life very difficult for volunteers. Those club committees will have been tortured this week, sorting that out. Tortured.
So what about the game itself? Ballybay and Clontibbert finished 1-9 apiece. Conor McManus sporting quite the peroxide blonde head of hair.
The Monaghan fellas, like Drew Wiley, come up to take the toss. Drew Wiley's the Ballybay captain, and Drew Wiley come up to take the toss, and like, it's sort of David Bowie on the top. And he had the Wolverine look for a wee while, the full big mop and the beard and everything, but he sort of shed that a wee bit now, but more respectable. There were so many county players on show between both teams yesterday.
That was all the shave or die thing, wasn't it? The fundraiser.
It's all shave or die thing, which they raised 30,000 sterling off, which was brilliant going, and a great thing to do, and a great cause, and a bit of crack, and harmless. And the fellas are still, I think some of them like it maybe a wee bit too much and might keep it. And Vinnie Corey's left the Monaghan setup. I was going to say he has no choice because he doesn't have anything left to die, but but there was some rare heads flying about yesterday. But the game, as I say, it was a good game, I say, two of the top teams, obviously Scottstown have been, well, Clontarf are county champions, Ballybay are league champions. Scottstown are the team in Monaghan over the last 7 or 8 years, and they had a tight enough game against Trua, but I think blooded a lot of young boys and left a lot of their experienced players on the bench and only called them when they were needed. But Ballybay, was massive for Ballybay to get a draw out of that game yesterday, even though they were at 164 up at a stage and going well in the first half against the wind. Died a bit when Paul Finlay went off injured. But psychologically, Ballybay just have so many scars over the last 5 or 6 years. You daren't even mention the day that they were 8 points up on Scottstown in injury time, 8 up on them, and conceded 2-2 in injury time, and got taken their replay and beat. And they've had near miss after near miss in big games like that, and psychologically, it just every wee big game that they lose like that just chips another wee bit off them. And they looked, from having been in a good position, they were 2 points down again yesterday going into injury time. And so to get a draw out of it was a decent result from that point, and they needed a draw out of it. I think psychologically they needed it, because it would have been a real hammer blow to start off on, and at least it gives them something to pick up on and run with. And
I was surprised to see that Conor McManus missed a penalty. Did he mishit it?
To be fair, the young goalkeeper, fella Adam Coonahan, who was making his championship debut, I think Ballybay had 4 goalkeepers and 3 of them were injured.
Right. Not a bad way to start your career.
And Adam Coonahan stepped in, and he punched the ball he probably could have caught that led to the penalty being given away, but he gave McManus the eyes and a bit of outfoxing. And he, sort of stand to one side and pointing to McManus' strong side where he normally goes, and then went the other side and made a decent save, but it popped back out, and Vinnie Corey stuck it away on the rebound, which sort of felt a bit sorry for the goalkeeper, because you could live off saving a Conor McManus penalty for quite a while as a club goalkeeper. So yeah. He doesn't even get to hold that.
And not too many goalkeepers concede a goal to Vinnie Corey either. He's more known for the defence, so...
Yeah. Vinny maybe argue with that. Vinny's known to pop up with goals in big games.
Okay.
With Monaghan as well.
I'm wrong in him
popped
then.
Popped up in Omagh a couple of years ago in that great game where the goal popped up in Croke Park against Kildare. Popped up in a league game against Dublin. Where they won in Croke Park. Vinnie Corey knows where the net is when he's played a lot of full forward for Clontarf, but that's where he was yesterday again. So he knows where they're at.
My apologies to Vinny. I'll just quickly run through a couple of the other results in Monaghan before we move on. Maracloon 2-9, Inniskeen 1-11, Scottstown 17, like you mentioned, Trua 1-12, and Latin 1-13, Castleblaney 0-9. I might just jump onto the Dublin Championship over the weekend. Now, there was a lot of games going on there. There's 4 groups. Which meant 8 games, and I'll just quickly run through the results and maybe touch on a couple of points. Thomas Davis 2-14, Round Towers of Lusk 11, Ballymun Kickham's 3-18, Skerry's Harps 12. I'm sure Dean Rock knocked over a few nice frees there. St Jude's 110, Nafina 0-8, Lucan 19, Ballantyre 9 points, Ballyboden 4-20, Clontarf 2-8, Whitehall Columkills 1-13, St Vincent's 2-15. Kilmacud Crokes battered Raheny 6-13 to 10 points, and Castleknock with Kieran Kilkenny centre back 2-15, Plunkett's 1-11. So what stood out to me there is that big result for Crokes against Raheny, 6-13 to 10 points, like 21 point victory in Gaelic football is no mean feat. Brian Howard and Brian Fenton in that Raheny team, but it just shows if you're not in a team that has quality all over the place, it's very hard to show off how good of a footballer you are.
Totally, and obviously we well know the strength of that Crokes team over the last few years as well, and the capabilities they have up front, especially that they could do that to do that to any team in senior club football. To put 6-13 on them is, it's a serious marker laid down. But it's funny, and you would know better. I'm not just 100%. Were the groups seated in Dublin? I assume they were. The drawing of the groups.
I'm not actually even 100% sure. I think they would have been drawn earlier on in the years. Looking at them, they look fairly balanced.
they look very seeded, because I looked through it and saw, you have two teams in each group, barring probably that Raheny group, that Kilmacud group. It looks, you would have thought that might be a wee bit tighter, but the other three groups, you could pick the two teams
more or less.
More, you have Thomas Davis and Ballymun, you have St Jude's and the Fianna, and you have Ballyboden and St Vincent's. So the groups look like they're set up for a very strong knockout stage in Dublin later on, but I would say you could probably see a few mismatches and a bit of shadow boxing in the group stages, because the stronger are going to get through it. The St Jude's result probably stood out to me, just looking at them. That obviously they're knocking on the door, but that's not a bad Fianna team, and it's a good starting point for St Jude's. If of any of the results, but I say it all looks a wee bit like shadow boxing at this stage, because you'd be very surprised if there are any of the top 8 that don't come out of that. Castleknock beating St Oliver Plunkett's probably, Castleknock will probably go out of it now, go through out of it, and that'll be the 8 settled.
Interested to see Kieran Kilkenny playing centre back there, because it's harder for, I don't know, is man marking as easy when a guy is centre back, and
nightmare.
Rather than if he's the other end of the field. The only thing I'd say about
you send somebody up.
What's that?
Do you send the defender up to mark him, and then this defender ends up, complete head staggers? If he gets the ball himself, doesn't know what to do. Do you try and? Very hard to put somebody like Kieran Kilkenny on the back foot.
Yeah, not everyone has Lee Keegan to put on him. Where he can
exactly and even a natural. You think, right? Well, we have a great centre half forward. We'll test Kilkenny defensively, but he's not going to be that easy tested, and just it's probably a very shrewd move. Kilkenny is a natural centre back. He looks like a natural centre back in so many ways, and it's interesting to see how that works out now, because it looks like a good move on the face of it.
Just a couple of other points then. Chris Barrett, who of course plays for Mayo, he made his debut for Clontarf in their match, and the other thing about Fianna, I'd say, is they pushed the eventual county champions Ballyboden all the way to extra time last year, and there was that famous sending off for Conor McHugh. I'd fancy them to be a team that would be able to bounce back. Like the Judes are kind of perennial bridesmaids in the Dublin Football Championship.
Yeah.
They're a big team. They're not afraid to get into your face. They have Niall Coakley, the former Cork star, as well, so they're not a bad team at all. Just moving on then to Cork, speaking of them, Castlehaven, they beat Carbery Rangers, who I think were without both John O'Rourke and John Hayes in their starting team. That was 14 points to 9. The Hurley brothers scored 10 points between them. Douglas won 14, Bishopstown won 9, Newcestown 317, Ellen Rovers won 7, Clonakilty won 12, Carrigaline 8 points. Nemo Rangers, who are obviously picking up county titles by the bucket load, 3-8, Valley Rovers won 9, and St Finbarrs won 13, Ballincollig 10. We already mentioned the Monaghan Championship. Just running into the Offaly Championship, Shamrocks beat Bracknell 115 to 211, Road 119, Clara 110, Ferban 112, and Edenderry 1-8, and a 12 points to 1-8 win for Cappin Kerr over Tullamore. I'm not sure if you heard about Boyle going miles ahead of Pádraig Pearses, the county champions in Roscommon, before eventually kind of turning it around late on. Boyle were 3-7 to 4 points ahead with 20 minutes to go. You'd actually think it'd be difficult to lose that winning position, but Pádraig Pearses brought it back to 2-10 to 3-7 and share the spoils.
That's some turnaround, and I know Pearses had probably been a long time without a county title, and probably knocking at the door a wee bit, and that wee bit of experience of last. Winning one can be massive for a club. If you get that monkey off your back, then all of a sudden the entire mentality of a place can change very quickly, and where you can do things like that. Would they have done that last year? Would they have come from 12 points down with 10 minutes to go, without the experience of doing what they've done? I don't know. We don't know them well enough, but it's a thing that champions do. It's a thing that teams that are used to winning and don't get beat. Only the really, really, really good teams can come from 12 points down with 10 minutes to go and not throw the towel in.
And if you want to see some of the other results from Roscommon, Sligo, Wicklow, the Kerry Club Football Championship, Leitrim and Antrim, they'll be on our game.ie. But just rather than running through all of those and droning on endlessly with just with scorelines, what are you making of the water breaks? What do you think they've added or taken away from Gaelic games?
It depends on how they're dealt with by referees, and that, like everything in the GA, there's just so much inconsistency. The idea is that fellas go, they get a drink of water and they come back on, but it's become a coaching match already. It has become an opportunity. It's starting to resemble a timeout in the American sports, where it's a chance to and there was a massive difference in the Ballybay game yesterday. There was 6-2 when the water break happened in the first half, and Clontibrick got three of the next 4 scores then after it, once they got their water break and maybe sorted themselves out a wee bit, and there was a bit of coaching could be seen within that break. So look, they're absolutely a necessity though. I think for fellas, obviously you can't share water bottles, and you need your own drinks. You can't just toss a bottle onto somebody during a game, and fellas need water, so it's just going to be a necessary evil. You're just going to have to learn to live with it. But you know what, sure, if there's a bit of coaching, I think probably regulating it would be the best thing. Set a minute aside, say it lasts a minute or last 90 seconds or whatever it is, and sure, you can coach in that 90 seconds if you want, or you can.
But does that not ruin the flow of a game? I mean, I'm all for players obviously have to get water, but if it was, I don't see why you couldn't do it in like 45 seconds. Why would it need to be any longer than that? I mean, to run the length of it, even if you're quite far away, you're still going to be able to get there in 20 seconds. Maybe, like, it's supposed to be a minute, but the problem is, I watched the game Friday night in TG Cahair, Kilmallock na Pearses. It was 2 minutes 20 seconds.
I haven't seen that, but that's the problem. That's what I was saying about the lack of regulation of it. Like it's such a GA thing that put in a rule and then just everybody do whatever they feel like doing. Like, and it's going to become an issue and teams are already starting to abuse it. You can see referees blowing a whistle and telling come on, and they're standing another 10 or 15, 20 seconds and sucking whatever time out of it they can. So, but look, that's just sure, we've a team staying in the changing room at All Ireland finals for 20 minutes. Teams are just going to break these rules, and that's it. But
do you feel like you seem to be okay with the idea of a tactical message coming on, but it does kind of break the flow of a game, that you might have a game that's the old term, taking on a life of its own. It's got a real energy to it, and then it just kind of sucks the mood out of it a little bit, and all of a sudden one manager's like, look, we'll get a few extra lads behind the ball. The other team is probably thinking something similar. This game is too frenetic, we need to calm it down. And that's actually a negative for the spectacle.
Possibly, but I think the flip side is that what we should be doing, I think what is in now for this year with the way things are, is that your mere foreigners are banned from the pitch, barring exceptional circumstances, and that should be the way it is. I've always been against it. I mean, must be the only sport in the world where we allow people to run on into the space where the ball's going to be kicked and not saying it, Jason Sherlock style, like. And I think if you allow that wee coaching interlude at a water break, if you allowed a minute or 90 seconds and then you took away any interview, nobody breaches the sideline, nobody comes onto the pitch at all at any stage, and you allow for that wee bit of coaching in that period, I think you could actually tidy the game up a bit. You could tidy the spectacle up a wee bit and not have that mess of men running on and catching a slither on a free.
Greg Kennedy, my old pal. Look, brilliant stuff, Cahair. The football, the hurling, they're back, so it's great to have them anyway, isn't it? I mean, just to sum things up, I mean, after a bleak old summer, it is just great to have it back.
Delighted if just the sun would come back out now and give us a wee bit of that. And
it's not too much to ask, is it? Bit of sun.
No.
July,
exactly. Like, we'll probably get it as usual the first 2 weekends of September when everybody's back to school. That's when it always happens. So, but if that's around county final time, maybe lovely.
Well, brilliant stuff, Cahair O'Kane, the Irish News. Really appreciate you joining me.
Thanks, Ian.